People fail because we screw it up, not because they screw it up. They come to us as employees to work for the employer as their leader. They come to you because they're not capable of being business owners on their own, and you are responsible to be their leader. If you have somebody on your staff that you think shouldn't work there, shame on you. Shame on you. The reason they're failing is your fault, not their fault. It's your fault.
Welcome to the Shark Tank Podcast. Each week, one of the best entrepreneurs from ABC's network smash hit Shark Tank teaches you how to swim with the sharks without being eaten alive. And now your host, serial entrepreneur, TJ Hale.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Shark Tank Podcast. Today, we are discussing the 4 Ps. Those are people, process, product, and podcast. I'm here with the prophet himself, also goes by the fixer, the turnaround king, el socio, for those of you who speak Espanol, and the consolidator. Marcus Lemonis, welcome back for another dip in the Shark Tank Podcast.
How are you? You had to work that el socio in there, didn't you? You figured out a way to work in the Latin American distribution. That was very clever of you.
Hey, you got a lot of fans out there that speak Spanish, y quiero que todos puedan escuchar en su propio idioma. So if you want to do the show in Spanish, we can definitely do that.
Well, I'll wait for that. We have an episode coming up in Miami, and it's probably maybe my most favorite episode of all time because I'm from Miami, and you see the level of United Nations in the place. It was like, the workers there were from Colombia, Argentina, Venezuela, Peru, Cuba, Mexico. I mean, it was pretty awesome. It was really awesome, actually.
We talked in the pregame about, you're the show going on iTunes, and now your international fans have an easy way to find it. Do you have a big Latin market? Like, is El Socio going to be a brand on a Mexican soccer league team jersey pretty soon?
I hope not. What happened was that the president of History or a senior executive of History or something like that fell in love with the show, and they decided to buy the rights to it in South America and in Latin America, and so it's airing on History Channel. Ironically enough, Tuesday night at 10 p.m.
No
and
kidding.
So it's I think they've aired 3 of the 25 so far, and it's getting a really nice response. I never knew what I would sound like dubbed, but I now know. It sounds totally different.
I wonder what that guy gets paid. El Lemonis.
I hope not much, to be honest with you. I hope not much.
So do they subtitle it, or is it all completely audio dubbed?
It depends on the market. And so in markets where English is, a 50-50 language, like in certain parts of Mexico, it's still in English with subtitles, and then in other parts of South America, it's dubbed. And it loses something dubbed. The folks that I'm friends with that are Hispanic have said to me, it's okay, but it's not as funny because the words don't necessarily translate as cleanly. But look, if we're adding value in more places, that's obviously a good thing.
Yeah, even the word el socio, it's not a direct translation, but good for them that they're getting exposed to it over there.
I think it means the partner, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah,
so
it's good. They're enjoying it, and it's obviously great to get that distribution. Do
you get involved at that level, or do the networks kind of handle all that and go, you know what, Marcus, don't worry, we got this. Just go do your thing. I mean,
it's funny that you say that. So NBC sold the rights, and then I've now worked directly with History Channel, separate from CNBC, on the PR side of things. We shot a couple commercials. We've done a bit of a press junket. I just am waiting for them to invite me to Brazil and Colombia, and that hasn't happened yet. But it's been something that I've stayed involved in because I want to make sure that the people that buy it get the value that they need to make it successful. Right? That's important to me.
Yeah, and at some point we'll have to talk about how you ended up on the History Channel as opposed to between Primer Impacto and Sábado Gigante, the History Channel. That seems interesting to me.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. I was listening to some clips you did at the Inc. 5000 conference in Phoenix, which bums me out that I wasn't aware that you were in my backyard a few months back. But you said something to me that I actually considered a plug. Now, the whole speech was great. I thought it was phenomenal, but this is something that really stuck out. So I'm going to go ahead and play this and get your feedback.
You see, you watch shows like Shark Tank, which I'm not a fan of, by the way. You can quote me on that. And I'm not a fan of it because I want to know more. Not because I don't like the show or like the people. I want to know more. I want to know, did the deal really happen? What did you really change? Did you just hand somebody a check? Or did you go in there and teach them how to do the packaging? Did you go in there and discipline them? Did you hold them accountable? Did you call them out for being arsonists?
When I heard this, I selfishly thought, man, he's plugging my show. And then I realized you were actually plugging The Prophet, because this is exactly what you do. And I just want to congratulate you on so far an amazing beginning to season 3. I've really enjoyed the first 2 episodes.
It's funny because after I said that, I thought of you. And I thought, I wonder how long it'll take you to call me about it. It did not take long for me to hear about it. And I think people thought that if they confronted me about it, I would change my opinion.
Which maybe they don't know you very well. I doubt that was successful.
Yeah, I'm not going to change my opinion. In fact, I will tell you that I had a soda with Mark Cuban last week after the Ink event in Chicago. We did an event together in Chicago.
Iconic, right?
And we had a good laugh because, I have a great appreciation for Mark. I think he is just a phenomenal individual. I think he brings a nice balance of humility and intelligence and good business all in one. I find him to be very inspiring. I'm inspired by him. I think he's a great dude. He's just a good man. But I've had some interaction with some of the other ones, and I would not say the same thing, to be candid with you. And I think that's some of my disappointment, is that I really believe that as a viewer, I want to have all the facts and all the details and all the kind of stuff behind the curtain, and I'm not sure that I'm getting that yet.
I'm going to touch on the first thing you said, which is you thought about me and I should have called you. And that's interesting because I feel like, and then my wife's like, how come you don't stay in touch with the people you interview? Because I'm very cautious about using those phone calls, especially with people as busy as you are, but I appreciate the thought. The second thing is I did see that you and Mark were speaking at Iconic. I was in Chicago the week before, unfortunately. And I always wondered, I'm like, is this going to be one of those things where you hear the Clint Eastwood, like, wah, wah music playing in the background and you guys are going to square off? Or do you just kind of do like the bro hug and start chatting, go, hey, we should do this more often? Like, what kind of I was wondering, confrontation, or was it like brothers? Did you guys get a chance to chat for a while?
Who's that, with Mark?
Yeah, with Mark, because I didn't realize it was the first time you'd ever met. I just assumed you.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't confrontation at all. It was very cool. He stayed after, because my presentation was at the end of the event, and he stayed to have a chance to catch up. And no, because I have such a great amount of respect for him. I think that he, as I said earlier, I think he just brings so much to the table. We had a good laugh about. He told me what an idiot I am for spending as much time as I do making my show. He's aware of how hard and long it takes to make it. And we talked a little bit about how we manage the different companies that we invest in, and how we spend our time, and how we look at them, and how we interact with them. And he told me that I was crazy. But it was very genuine, and it was very different. And I've interacted with all of them in one environment or another. And I would say that Mark is by far, in my opinion, from my experience, somebody that I would definitely call a clear leader in the marketplace. He's just a great guy.
It's a strong endorsement. So hopefully I'll have him on at some point. I keep hearing from friends of his that he doesn't like doing interviews. He likes to text or cyberdust everything. So I don't know if it's possible to cyberdust a podcast. We'll see. Last time that you came on, I had just gotten wind of a story that I want to share with you. I know you do a lot of interviews, so I'm hoping this one will stand out because it's really one of the most amazing stories I'm going to get to share on my podcast, and it involves you inadvertently. So if you'll humor me for a moment, I just want to kind of take you through what happened here.
Yep.
You had started your Twitter feed. I know you were a Twitter noob, and it blew up. It's probably late 2013. And there's a group of Shark Tank guys or gals that they live tweet, and one of them's name is Mark Berginger, and he owns Quibbits, which is a season 1 contestant or product, however you want to say it. And he was live tweeting, bragging about how after you did your infamous Twitter dump, the Lemonis Twitter dump of 2014, he was the only person that you followed from that Mark Cuban and you, Marcus Lemonis, followed. And so he was bragging a little bit, jokingly. And this other gentleman, Dr. Roland, who I've now had on the show as a result of this, tweeted back and said, no, that's not true. He follows me as well. And then he was sad to find out that you had dumped your Twitter followers and or your followees, and he was no longer on the list. He wasn't a Marcus VIP anymore. So the point of this is that when he found out, he tweeted you and said, hey, it's okay. Even Jesus lost followers. And then a couple minutes later, he said you retweeted him back, and they all had a huge laugh about it. Do you remember this by any chance?
I do. And I remember Quibbit because I had actually an interesting interaction with him. He was private messaging me almost every day about doing a deal with him, and I couldn't remember the actual logistics, but I was confused. Did he get a deal in season 1?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay. Yeah, he's got a really cool toy. I think it's I don't want to call it like Legos, but it's parts and pieces that you put together. Is that right?
Yeah, it's for, it's kind of like for engineering of the mind, right? I guess you could say it's like Legos. He probably wouldn't like that either, but it's a little more complex.
No, but I mean, I'm trying to, for people who are listening that can't visualize it, it's parts and pieces that you put together, and it's a very cool product, and it's educational. But I do remember the interaction.
Well, what you probably...
But I'm not sure I dumped a lot of people. I'll tell you what happened. I love to follow people because I feel like I can have personal relationships with them. But what I don't like is when people then all of a sudden send me a message every 5 minutes, because I read all my private messages. And it becomes a little like you invite somebody over for dinner and then they come every day. I think there's a balance there.
And they don't leave.
And so I ended up kind of cleaning up the ones that I thought had really kind of, okay, you're now like in my house every 5 seconds. And so I think that it sounds odd and maybe people don't like it, but you can't have intimate relationship with everybody in the world. There's just not enough time in the day.
Well, if I recall, you had a ratio of 1-to-1 at like 200,000 followers, and then it went down to less than 30, and you started to build it up from there, which I think is fine. But I want to relate it back to the story because I don't know if you know what happened after that. The gentleman I want to focus on is Dr. Roland. He's got a product called Low Backtracks. And I've actually had him on the show as a result of this, but he had tried out for Shark Tank all 6 seasons in a row, had never got an email, never got a phone call. He's one of these guys who put every hard dollar he had into this company. He's a chiropractor.
What's the product called?
It's called Low Backtracks, LO-BAKTRAX.
Huh. Okay.
Might be 2 X's. But he had, after he invented it, it's to help with lower back pain. And he had to get FDA approval, which basically almost cost him his house. He sold his car. If it wasn't for his overly supportive wife, I'm sure she would have left as well. And so he's live tweeting, and this thing happens where he sends it back to you, and you refollowed him, and they had a big laugh about it. Apparently, Barbara retweeted that. And the story, I might be hazy on the details, but apparently Lori Grenier caught a wind of one of these tweets, and she was looking at his Twitter feed, and one of the last tweets that he had answered that night was a young lady asking if it helped with spinal stenosis, his product. And he tweeted back, said, absolutely, go to my website, check it out, it will help immensely. And Lori's dad has been suffering with spinal stenosis. So she goes, incognito, buys a couple of his products, gives them to her dad around Christmas time. And he said to her, Lori, this is the best thing you've ever bought me. It absolutely is helping with my back pain. So fast forward from Thanksgiving to Christmas time to 4 or 5 months later, here's a guy who's almost penniless. He's really in despair as an entrepreneur. He's past the point of crazy, and you know what I'm talking about. And she brings him on QVC, sells out his entire inventory that's been sitting on, and he can't sell it because his cost of product is actually too high to support it in the marketplace. She sells him out in a 10-minute segment in like 4 minutes. And QVC loves it. They're reordering, and he's going to go back on. I think he's trying to get his manufacturing worked out in China, but he has a date basically slotted for whenever he's ready to go back on and take 5 times the inventory. So whenever your book comes out, I think you ought to include the time that Marcus Lemonis inadvertently saved Low Backtracks by unfollowing him on Twitter.
That's a very cool story. And what's funny is I just looked him up on my account, and I follow him, and he follows me, and he's got a nice picture of him and Lori, which is good. Which is great.
Yeah, I mean, think about that. It started with a laugh on Twitter, and now he's got a Shark Tank Fast Pass, and he's in Lori's inner circle, and it all started.
I'll tell you the thing about Twitter that's been most shocking to me is how impactful it can be. and how it really truly is a way to communicate with people and build a network and build relationships with people or end relationships with people. It's just kind of fascinating. And I get a lot of different product pitches. I'm sure that it's a small percentage as compared to the sharks, but I get a lot of different product pitches, and sometimes things work. And sometimes they don't, and it's kind of neat.
You mentioned Mark calling you crazy. I'm actually curious. I think I did this last time. I said you're going to eventually have to get off social media because it's going to run your entire life. You don't seem to mind. I've heard you talk about the character of someone who allows his or her customers to access them. But a lot of the sharks, they have these infrastructures built up to buffer them and to really vet out those clients, same as QVC does. And whereas you kind of just seem to pick and choose, is there ever going to come a point where you just can't manage it anymore and you have everyone go through certain channels? Because like I do the Shark Tank podcast, I get 5 or 6 pitches a day, and that's not even what I do. And I think it must be 1,000 times that for people like you and Mark Cuban, et cetera.
You know what? I don't have anybody between me and people. Nobody. Like, not at all. It's just me, and I get my emails and I get my social media feed, and it's just me interacting with people, and I like it that way. I just don't want to have other people responding on my behalf. I feel like it loses something. And so it's obviously been daunting, but it's been I think part of our secret success is that people like to be able to have access, and sometimes I tell people to stop, and sometimes I tell people, okay, that's enough, or I tell people no. But I don't want to have that infrastructure and build those walls. It's just not who I am. I don't have an assistant. I told you that last time. I don't have an assistant because I don't know. I can make my own reservations. It's much easier.
Did you ever, this might be outdated. I don't know if you and your significant other are still together or not. So forgive me if I'm.
We are.
Okay.
Yeah, we are.
Did you ever allow her to refriend you on Facebook?
No. Mm-mm. No, and you know it's funny. I try to keep my friends out of my social media stream just because I don't want them to be inundated with all kinds of stuff. And if we want to talk, we talk kind of one-on-one. But social media is a good thing, but it could be a dangerous thing because it could literally swallow you. And that's something that I've really tried to balance. I really, really tried to balance it. It's been tough. And I think you and I talked, about a year ago? It's been about a year ago now?
Yeah, it's been a while.
And, I would say my life is pretty much the same as it was a year ago. I have more businesses, but it's as good, if not better, than it was a year ago because I've kind of gotten comfortable, with everything that's happening. And back then it was kind of all moving so fast. It was tough, really tough.
Well, I brought it up because I had heard you say that, I can picture my wife coming to my, valiantly coming to my defense when someone says something bad about me on social media. But I laughed when you said you had to take her off because I was thinking about when I went to my audience and said, hey, Marcus is coming on the podcast. I really want to get some questions from you. And I got some marriage proposals, most of them women. Probably a couple of men thrown in there, but so I can see her. I can see you consciously making the decision to ixnay her out of that process.
I know. How's your business been? Good.
Yeah, business has been great. I'm the podcast arena is something that really excites me. I think that you look at the metrics and the future of it. I got to meet the founder of Podcast One, Norm Patisse, who formerly was the CEO of Westworld One. You might know him. I don't know. I mean, it was the most successful radio company in existence. And he sold it years ago, decades ago, and then just jumped back in the game a couple of years ago and said, he went back to his radio company friends and executives and said, what we did with Westworld One will not hold a candle to what's going to happen with Podcast One. And the reason is, he goes, you look at the superiority of the podcast platform, the on-demand format, the metrics, the fact that you can monitor when people are listening, what they're listening to, how long they listen. He goes, the radio game basically is all made up of smoke and mirrors because you don't know what's hitting and what isn't. You're kind of just guessing. So for advertisers, it's a cleaner, easier, more efficient way to figure out what people really want to listen to and what they don't want to listen to. So I'm looking at joining his network soon because I need a distribution platform. But I think overall...
very cool. That's a great news. Congratulations.
I just think that really, and you're seeing this, talented people are having fewer barriers of entry to do the things that they really want to do. They don't need large corporations. They don't need approval. They can choose themselves, and they have the means via technology to build huge platforms without a lot of help or investment. So I think I get excited about it every day. I love it. Thanks for asking.
That's good. I'm glad for you. Really glad.
So I really want to talk about your life. You said you've kind of gotten used to it. You've come to grips with dealing with it. What is your daily routine like? Let's start with the morning. Do you have a morning routine to get you ready to face it every day?
It depends on where I am. I think the biggest difference is that I'm shooting 9 to 10 months of the year. And so my morning routine while we're shooting the show also depends on what city I'm in. And so if I'm in New York City, I'll get up early and go spin at 7 in the morning and have some breakfast and get started, make calls for a couple hours and then go. If I'm in Kansas City, I may work out at the end of the day, but I always try to start my day with some level of a list make. I make a list in the morning and kind of talk about what it is that I need to do that day, who I need to talk to, and what I talk to about. And I keep it in my back pocket, and I literally cross things out as things go. I sometimes don't get to my list, but it's been a big help. And I try to work in exercise somewhere in my day, and work in a good amount of sleep and eating healthy. And it's made a difference, because in the last season, the one that I'm just finishing now, I didn't get sick and I didn't get exhausted, because I really put myself on a very tight regiment and tried to stick to it. But the challenge that I have, TJ, and we've talked about it before, is that I have another business called Camping World, and that really takes up the bulk of my time. That's my number one child. That's the business that I love the most, and then you add in all the other businesses that have now become part of the platform. And they grow. As we make a season, they grow. In this season that I'm shooting now, we did 10 episodes, and it's 8 new companies are going to come on board, and so that's a lot to pile on top of what I already have. So my days are ever changing, but they seem more organized and more structured than they ever have.
We talked about Mark Cuban. Most of the Sharks have an organization or infrastructure in place. Hey, Johnny, doing a podcast, buddy. Go on. Kids. Most of them have an infrastructure in place where they can manage that without having to be present all the time. And you talked about wanting to do a lot of these things yourself and have personal contact. Do you scale your own internal business every time you add on a business? Do you get more individuals in charge of coordinating them, assisting them, like some of the ones you bring on the show from time to time for everything from interior decorating to accounting, etc.?
What I build is my accounting infrastructure. I don't build anything else. And so as I add businesses, I add an accounting platform, because at the end of the day, that's really what I need to be able to keep and monitor these businesses. I don't need operational people. I did bring on a few people to help with a Greek franchise, somebody that had franchise experience or somebody that has the manufacturing experience. But for the most part, the staff that I have around me that's helping me, that really makes things work, are very much accounting in nature, because obviously the numbers tell the whole story, right? And they give me the ability to make a phone call and make 3 or 4 different moves and change things. So I think that's the most important thing.
There was a tweet that I sent out during your episode with Sweet Pete's to Tim Ferriss. It was the first time I tweeted him. I don't know if you know who that is or not, but he's the gentleman who wrote the 4-Hour Work Week. And during the show, it kind of caught you off guard. It looked like you weren't aware of what that was. And I got Tim's attention right away. He's a very successful individual. Are you familiar with that now?
I am. In fact, I heard about it because I remember the guy on the show telling me something about working 4 hours a week.
Right.
I was like, that was crazy. I had heard of the book before, and I know it was more of a play on words than anything else, right?
Yeah, it's about lifestyle design, basically. But Tim Ferriss does not. I mean, he might sleep 4 hours a week. He grinds like you do. He's a hard worker.
Right. Right, that's funny. Very funny.
Well, the reason I brought it up is obviously your name got his attention. I have a couple of people online that I follow. They're like virtual mentors, and I've gotten Marcus Lemonis emails from them that they send out to their group, analyzing, the way that you do things, the way that you interact, the way you introduce yourself. I mean, really getting down to the minutia. And one of them recently was from Ramit Sethi, a gentleman I enjoy his content, and he breaks down, the psychology of success. And he mentioned, in the middle of the show, there's always a conflict, and you don't offer 5 different options to get out of it. You make a decision, you offer it, and then that's it. And you close the book on it and move on. He talks about how you resolve conflicts and essentially kind of the way that you break down the decision-making process. And I think that's one thing that people really enjoy about the show is you seem so decisive and confident about the things that you do and the rapport you build with people. I'm curious if this is something that came naturally to you or if it's just kind of been the result of you chipping away at it every single day and improving yourself.
No, I would say that when I think about my life, I think about the gifts that I was given, and there's a few of them, right? I feel like I'm pretty good at math. And so thank God I was born with a bit of a calculator in my head. I would say that I'm a good listener, but need to get better. But I think the thing that I probably was given the most is the ability to communicate with people and relate to people and get them to see things differently. And so much of what I do in real life, which translates to the show, is bridge people and bridge relationships. And if you really look at business in general, whether it's a Fortune 100 company or this brand new company on the corner of 5th and Main, their issues, when they have them, usually surround around people, and they usually surround around relationships. A spouse works there, a son works there, a bad partnership, a good partnership, brothers gone bad. I mean, all the different scenarios that we've seen and heard all of them. And I think for me, it's being able to be a third-party observer, be objective about it, and get down to kind of what the real issues are without the risk, because I don't have any risk of being thrown out of there. I'm not a consultant. I now either own the place or control the place. And so I have the ability to control the process and the outcome of forcing worlds to collide and forcing people to deal with it. It is something that I actually enjoy, because I know that in fixing the business, that is such a large element of it that once I fix that, it makes the rest a lot easier. And people have, made the Oprah joke and the Dr. Phil joke and all this. I've heard them all. But at the end of the day, part of the reason that I think the show has a very funny double entendre name to it is that I'm not a prophet with a PH. I would say I'm not a prophet with an F. I'm a combination of both of them, in the sense that I'm trying to make money and communicate with people. That's really what I do. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't, and sometimes people hustle me. And so I think there is a big psychology to it, and I definitely have gotten better at it over the years. But I would say that I had that skill even as a child to be able to do it. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just what God gave me, is that skill, and it's worked. I'm trying to utilize it.
Yeah, the jokes about the Oprah thing is great. The Dr. Lemonis, the Oprah's Lemonis. I've heard a few great ones. I might have made those up.
Yeah, I've heard them. I've heard them all too. And at the end of the day, what's funny about it is that there are, if you follow Twitter like I do during the show, because I live tweet during the show, there are people who it absolutely bothers. They're so annoyed by it. And there are other people who are literally so engaged by it. And it's funny, I try not to pay attention to either. I try to just keep it as real as possible, but it's hard to do business without that. I just don't think it's possible.
Yeah, it is really funny. I look at it, people are so in awe of the ability that you have that you just described. And so when you don't make a good deal, or when you do something they perceive as foolish, they jump all over it. And I that cracks me up every time someone, especially if you're on Reddit. Usually on Twitter, it's not as bad, but they just go crazy when you make a mistake, which one of them I'm going to bring up here and have you kind of give me some background on.
But I like making mistakes. You know that? I really like it for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's good for me to learn, but I also want other people to know that it's human to make mistakes. I mean, if you find me somebody that doesn't make mistakes, I'll call them a stone statue. And so I think people appreciate the fact that I'm willing to be honest about it and just show it and full transparency. Yeah, I'm not the smartest guy. Sometimes I do really stupid things. We kind of all do, don't we? In a way.
Yeah, I think most of us just do them with less money. Like the artistic stitch, the $300,000. Let's be honest.
Gone.
And actually, this came up in our last chat. You had just aired that episode, like the day we interviewed. I think it was the following day. And I said, "Are we sure Sal isn't a crook? Like, he looks like a crook to me." And you gave a very nice, kind Marcus response to, kind of letting it play out. I don't know what you knew at that point in terms of what had already happened after the airing, but after seeing the artistic stitch, or what was formerly, Queen's Vibe replay, I thought, if Sal was in Goodfellas, like Joe Pesci would have been out in the desert digging a hole for him. And here you are in the office, like cool as a cucumber, just like, all right, well, $300K down the drain, missing printer, no big deal, live and learn. So I think that's what sets people off.
Yeah, I mean, it really wasn't that. I think what happened was, in the middle of being in that whole kind of nastiness, it was very hard for me to not just take a step back, and I was overwhelmed by it. I mean, there was so much crazy happening that it was hard for me not to just I mean, I had already been through it for months, and I'd already been frustrated with Sal, and I'd already had the printer disappear, and I hadn't physically seen him. And when I went there and surprised him, he looked like he just rolled out of bed, and he looked like he saw a ghost, and which is why I said to him, "Do I look familiar to you?" We had plenty of email exchanges, and we had plenty of phone exchanges, and it just was such a bad situation that I really I went there. All I wanted from him was an apology, because at that point, so much had happened. I take $300,000 seriously. What was I going to do? Yell at him? Sue him? Well, he doesn't have anything. And so people that were frustrated with me about my reaction, I was kind of like, well, what was I supposed to do? Like, throw him up against the wall? I mean, what do you do in that moment? You've been totally hustled by somebody. You're standing in front of them. They don't have a pot to piss in. They've totally taken advantage of you. You can't sue them because they don't have anything. They're about to get foreclosed on. What do you do in that moment? It's a question, I guess.
Whenever, and sometimes...
CJ, you answer that. What do you do in that moment?
Well, to be honest, maybe it's my faith, maybe it's my demeanor, but I don't get... we play soccer, and sometimes it gets really competitive in our league. My wife always jokes that I just never lose my cool or get angry, and I think that's something that I was born with. But I would have asked for a pizza because the pizza still looks delicious. There's just nobody in the restaurant.
But it wasn't open.
Oh, okay.
The place was desolate.
Well, then I would have thrown it against the wall.
It was so depressing.
But on top of that, when we watch Shark Tank and Mark Cuban says, "All right, I'll give you 50 grand, whatever," and you look at that as a percentage of his net worth, I go, that's like me giving him $5. However, when people hear that he lost $300,000, and more importantly, all the time that you invested in it, I look at that and say, well, is $300,000 that important to Marcus? I don't know. I can't answer that. Yes. It's very important to me. Like it would be. $300,000 is more than my first house cost me. Yes, $300,000 is important, but I guess what I would say, the way I think about all of my deals in general, is that I kind of dollar cost average them. And a lot of people don't like that I do that, but I look at my total investment and I look at the total assets that I have, and whether it's property or cash flow or whatever it may be, and I somehow rationalize it. It stings really bad. In fact, I have a running total of how much I've invested and how much I've lost. And on the show, I've invested over $23 million. And I would say that about 1.4 of it, okay, not 300, about 1.4 of it is gone. It's gone. Totally gone. And that's after all the math. So that's,
or whether I feel like the equity value, I've overpaid for it, or whether I had to put more money in to salvage something, 1.4 of it is totally down the drain. And I don't take that lightly, and I don't think about it as anything other than lost money. But I also could tell you that outside of the show, I've done plenty of deals, and they all haven't worked out. And so that's kind of, some people buy boats and planes and make expensive purchases and they depreciate. Some people buy stocks and they depreciate. Some people invest their money in 401ks and they depreciate or they go down in value. I don't do any of those things, by the way. I just invest in businesses, and I make mistakes. And I would say in the case of Artistic Stitch, it was 100% an error in my judgment. I really thought I could change somebody. If I just put my own businesses through there, just the ones I own today, and nothing else, I would have made 300 grand in a year. I would have made my money back. But I can't babysit people and control the outcome. I can't control their behavior. And, listen, I had somebody send me an email the other day that said they're never going to watch my show again because I look like an idiot when I make investments. Okay. I guess. I also don't go out there and tell you how much money I've made or how much I'm worth or what I have. I don't do that because I don't think that's part of who I am. But I would say the law of averages are kind of on my side. But yeah, I guess I was an idiot. But have you ever dated anybody that you regretted? Have you ever bought anything that you shouldn't have bought?
No, but they've dated me. Ooh.
Huh?
No, but they've dated me.
Yeah, so we make mistakes, but isn't that part of what makes the show work, is that people see that Marcus makes mistakes too?
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know.
I think that, when you ask me what I would do, I think the accumulation factor is a big part of it. Every day we wake up and we have our challenges. They're not $300,000 challenges for us. They're family, life, business, time constraints. There's always things left on the list. And at the end of the day, you measure it by whether or not you made progress or whether you went forward or backward. And so I think that principle applies to you, even though the dollar amounts are larger. So I kind of like the way you simplified that.
But they hurt. It still hurts. Don't anybody be confused. Whether I lose 3,000 or 300,000, it still hurts. And so I think at the end of the day, I just have to be able to pick myself back off, dust myself off. And maybe part of the reason that I wasn't as angry at Sal, and kind of in reflection, I thought about it, last week, is because I realized that I made the mistake. Like, how do you blame somebody? Like, I'm so sick of people blaming other people for mistakes that they make. I made the mistake. I misjudged the situation. I wrote the check. It's me. It's not anybody else. And so I probably was more annoyed with myself and more, I guess, bummed out that I did it. And that's kind of a real answer. It's like, why am I going to be mad at somebody else? I'm the one that did it.
I think that's something that resonates with people. When you talk about, there's so much division surrounding the wealth inequality today. And you look at the things that are left out of that conversation, the character inequality, the integrity inequality, the spiritual inequality, the leadership inequality. I mean, those are all factors that, they add into that equation, but they don't get the focus. So you just said it right there. When you take the responsibility for the outcome, like you do when you say that if you have an employee that doesn't belong there or they fail, it's not the employee's fault. And I know so few people who take that a level of responsibility for failure around them. I think that really resonates with employers and employees alike.
Well, you know what else it does? It also shows people that it's okay to make a mistake. Like I think that the single biggest benefit that I get out of the show is what's happening with young kids today. I get kids 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 12-year-olds that walk up to me, and they truly, fifth graders are smarter than we are. They ask me better questions. They tell me what they learned. They take a lesson out of it, how not to treat people, how to treat people, the importance of a handshake. I know that there's certain schools that are putting it in their school district where they're watching the show, and these kids are learning something. When you can make yourself vulnerable, and you could put yourself out there, and you could show the good, the bad, and the ugly about yourself, it gives people the comfort that they can do the same. And that is hard for people to do. It's hard for people to admit it. I want people to be okay with it. And my mother used to tell me all the time that the greatest way to gain people's favor is to make fun of yourself, because they know that you're real. Right? If you make fun of yourself and you admit your faults and your mistakes, people will trust you because they know that you're not always telling them how wonderful everything is.
I've heard you talk about your mother a lot when I've been kind of researching what I want to talk to you about. I mean, a lot, more than anyone else I can remember. So it makes me feel warm and fuzzy inside thinking about my own parents and the things they taught me and how long those lessons actually last, well beyond the time that they're not with us anymore. So that just stuck out to me for some reason.
Yeah. I have this, I think you've heard me say it before, I use the mother factor. We've all been at a party when we were a kid, and we get that glare from our mothers across the room that has no words connected to it, and you are in big trouble. It's kind of that look, right? And so when I do business and I do deals and I shake people's hands or I do whatever I do, I always, oddly enough, I don't know why I do it, but I always think about what my mother's reaction would be. And if I would get that same raised eyebrow that I used to get from across the room, which is like, I'm going to beat you down when you get close to me if you don't stop. Yeah. And so I always think about that and like how she would react. And she always was focused on me being a good business person, but doing it without ego and without pretense and without kind of greed. Make money. You have to make money. Make sure that other people make money. Be fair with people. Don't try to like con them and outsmart them. And her biggest thing with me is that if you're better at math than everybody else, use it as a tool and not a weapon, which I thought was really good advice, because I feel like there are times, particularly on the show when I'm negotiating, where I could get a much better deal. Always. I always know I can get a better deal. But I want a deal that everybody feels good about. And so whether I get 11.2% in return or 13.675% in return, what's the difference? I mean, is 2 percentage points going to change my life? And am I really just going to enjoy doing business with them and making a nice living? And I'd much rather enjoy my partnerships and have them prosper and me prosper at the same time. And that's I think what's missing right now with people. You can make money. I'm not saying you can't make money, but you got to be fair to everybody.
You know, as you're speaking, it kind of reminded me that I thought about you the other day. Well, maybe I do a lot. I'm not going to admit that here on the radio show, but I was actually, the thing that's been really great about the podcast is getting to know the entrepreneurs and the stories behind them. And recently I got to spend time with one. His name's Dave Alwan. He's from Echo Valley Meats. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all or not, but he recently did a deal with Mark Cuban on his second go ahead in the tank. And he and I were visiting for his viewing party, and he took me to a friend of his business, and the gentleman's name is Mike Dalton, and he is the CEO and co-founder of Maui Jim Sunglasses. It was one of those experiences that in a small way kind of changed my perspective, probably ended up changing my life. We walked through this facility, and for 2 hours, he told us the story, he showed us the facility, and every single person that he walked up to, he knew their name, he knew something about him, he knew what they did the week before. I mean, they talked to him like they were family. And by the time we were done, he said, you probably could guess on your own, but you realize the average tenure here is over 15 years because people come here and they never leave. And I just remember walking to that building and going, oh my gosh, I've never seen anything like this ever. It's incredible. And,
wow.
And I know that, you know, I've talked to Karen a lot, obviously, as we've been scheduling these interviews, but you feel that when people really love what they do and they feel valued and appreciated and feel like they're part of something bigger than just coming in, clocking in. So I'm going to link to the Inc. speech that you gave on my podcast post because you talked about turnover and doing the job that your employees do and understanding. And you also mentioned the 32 hours of volunteer work that you mandate. And maybe you can take a second and talk about that.
You know, I've always been a big believer that in order to have a good workplace, you have to have, you know, good people working there. And part of that is giving people an opportunity to learn more about themselves and learn more about other people. And so about 4 years ago, we instituted a mandatory, and it's in all my businesses, a mandatory volunteer program. And I require that people volunteer 8 hours a quarter, 32 hours a year, and they do it on company time, not on their own time, because I want to be able to mandate it. And so you can't mandate something off the clock unless you pay people. And initially, you know, it started out with a very strong condition of employment. If you don't want to do it, you can't work here. And I had a few people push back and tell me this is, you know, I was a socialist or a communist or whatever they like to call me that day.
Marcus the Dictator.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, those same people a year later told me that I saved their marriage, the program helped them build relationships with their children. I'm a big believer that everybody needs some level of soul cleansing. And we get so caught up in our own problems and our own issues. And I think even though when things are really bad for all of us or bad for people, that there always is somebody that has it worse. And so this program has really given people the opportunity to go out and see and meet new people and do new things and experience different things. And I think that is a very big deal. And it's been good. And so anytime you can volunteer, I think it makes a big difference, really big difference.
You know, I want to talk, we haven't talked enough about season 3 of the show. So I want to jump into this. SJC Drums was phenomenal. I'm starting to think you are the white Oprah. You can deny it all you want, but I think that's the direction that we're going. I can see your daytime talk show.
She has more hair than I do. That's the difference between Oprah and I. She's got a lot of hair and I'm losing mine.
Well, if that's the only difference, we can fix that. I mean, if that's the only barrier to get.
Yeah, I can wear like a wig or something. But it was a good episode. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
The update was also very good. The last time you and I spoke, however, you said, hey, make sure everyone knows the one they have to watch is coming up, and it was the Swanson's Fish Market, which was that week. Is there another Swanson's Fish Market this season? Is there one that we have to absolutely watch if we don't watch any others?
Yeah, I would say that there's one that's like that, but it's called Fuel Foods. It's in West Palm Beach, Florida. It's a fuel delivery service that the guy isn't totally transparent with me, and I learned some stuff at the end, and it's funny because everybody knows how I live my life on the handshake, and this guy actually accuses me of not honoring my handshake after I find out that his investor is indicted for a Ponzi scheme. There's kind of a small detail, and so it's an interesting one. But you know what? I would say that this season feels a little different to me. A lot more manufacturing. We had the drums, as you know. I have a burger place on Staten Island, which is a really interesting dynamic with five best friends that's totally fallen apart, and so that'll feel a little like SJC. I have a small cupcake business in New York that is on tonight. That's the one that's on tonight. I have a furniture manufacturer. I have a cosmetics company in Kansas City. There's just a lot of really different sort of stuff. And so from a business standpoint, people will get a look-see into different sorts of industries, which is always good, right? It's always good for people to get a different purview on things.
SJC was great because you take this company that's got an amazing product. And this is the problem that most entrepreneurs, at least in my audience, really want to have, where they have so many orders that they don't even know where to start. They can't get their stuff together. They've got this amazing product and they can't fix the process. So I felt like that was tailor-made for you to come in there. But it always amazes me when someone has something in such high demand and they can't figure out a way to just get the stuff built and get it out the door. Is that the easy part or the hard part?
But it's not just the working capital. It's not just the process. There has to be everybody in the right job. And what happened at SJC is that the wheels fell off the bus. They didn't have the working capital to fulfill the orders. They didn't have a system in place to execute volume, and they lost their innovator. And so you take those three elements out of the equation, and it's basically a business that's going to close. You put those three elements back in the business, and all of a sudden the business is wildly successful. It doesn't mean that we've solved, world hunger or cracked the code, but we've given it a real fighting chance. And that's all we can do in these. And sometimes they work, and sometimes they don't work.
Again, summoning the collective thoughts and sentiments of my audience, I think one thing that's really frustrating for them to watch, in a good way, when they see the profit, is when you had your recap for Coopersburg Sports. Hopefully I'm saying that right. And they, you go in there, you make your deal for $600,000, whatever it was, and then you say, over the course of so many months, I've invested now over $1.4 million. And a lot of them think, wait a minute, if I had a Marcus Lemonis, if I had someone who could say, hey, I can fix that problem by throwing a couple $100,000 more at it, I would be unstoppable. I would be able to take over the world. They always have that mindset that a little bit more money is going to fix the problem. And it turned out that was the case with Coopersburg, ostensibly. So what would you say to entrepreneurs who feel like another $50,000, $100,000, $200,000 would solve their biggest problems and help them to scale and grow and become a large company? I
would argue with them that can't be the only thing. Money doesn't solve everything, and it didn't solve it at Coopersburg. The discipline and the structure and the focus is a big part of that. Understanding what you're going to do with the money is a big part of that. Understanding how you're going to deal with growth on the human capital side is a big part of it. And so anybody that tells me, and I get emails all the time, I just need $100,000, I need $200,000. I'm not a bank. And so if that's all you need and your business is doing as good as you say it is, then you should be able to get a loan, right? Or you should be able to call Kevin O'Leary and he'll do a royalty deal with you. But that's not the only thing. That's not the reason that a business doesn't work. There's a lot more reasons than just money. And so I would tell the entrepreneur that if you have a list of 5 things that you need help with, if you meet with me, don't make money the first one. It maybe needs to be on the list, but it can't be the number one thing, because if it is, I'm not the right guy for you.
There were a couple of tweets about the first 2 episodes, and I picked out 2 that I really liked that you had retweeted. The first one was about Artistic Stitch, when the gentleman said Marcus got robbed in Queens on TV. Dying laughing. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah.
Get robbed in Queens is not usually on TV.
The worry that I have about something like that is, I think I got a couple other ones. It's like, what's up with, people in New York and stuff like that. Look, I had a bad experience and it happened to be in Queens, but I also have had some great experiences in Queens. And so I got mugged. I mean, that's what I would tell you. I think you saw that producer ask me in the car ride over if I felt like I got hustled. Yeah, I did. I got hustled. No doubt about it.
The other one was, I thought, well, I'm not politically correct, so I just laughed because I thought it was funny. But the other one was about the printer and how you ended up eventually. Someone joked that Sal sold it to Coopersburg Sports, which means you actually bought the printer not once but twice, which had me rolling.
I actually thought that was pretty funny. I actually thought that one was really funny, that people assumed that I was yelling about a printer at Scott for buying one and I was yelling at Sal for selling one. The good news is they weren't the same printer, but damn, man, I am really tired of printers right now.
we need a new name.
Somebody told me to actually invest in a company that makes printers, that I want them to go through all this.
You just dip into your own cookie jar. Yeah, we need a new meme, and I'm not a Photoshop guy. It'd be people, process, product, printers. Marcus Lemonis.
Exactly.
Real quick, I feel like in a lot of the interviews I've heard, one thing, you obviously keep your personal life and your public life kind of separated from each other. I just want to give a little more flavor for you. I know you're so busy. You say you don't want to disappoint friends. You don't have a lot of relationships. You don't go to your high school reunion. And I get why that is. But I got a couple questions I want to rattle off real quick just to give people a flavor of your personality. Let's start with this. What is your current smartphone background? What do you see when you're on your home screen?
Let me look at that. It is a picture of the downtown Chicago skyline. I'm looking at it now.
Okay.
So you mean where my icons are? Yeah.
Yeah. What do you see every time you pick up your phone? All right. What book do you re-gift most often?
What book do I re-gift?
Yes.
I only give out one book suggestion. That's Adam Grant, Give and Take. I think it's a very smart book, and it's about relationships and people and how you treat people and how sometimes you feel like you're being taken advantage of and it works out in the end. So that's Adam Grant, Give and Take.
Excellent. Thank you. What is the best concert you ever went to?
Best concert I ever went to was U2 while I was in college at the University of Wisconsin in Madison.
Which tour was that? This is for me out of curiosity.
Oh, gosh. I don't know. It was 1994. So it was, God, I don't remember.
It was right around Pop.
Maybe the Joshua Tree?
Okay.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's about the right time frame. All right. What movie makes you laugh hysterically, no matter how many times you watch it?
Anything with Vince Vaughn.
No kidding.
He's funny, makes me laugh. Makes me really, really laugh. He's a funny guy. And his mother used to be a yoga instructor that I used to go to her class because we live in the same, his mother and I live in the same area.
I didn't know that.
He's a funny guy. Very funny.
Is the pink sweater making a comeback this season? Are we going to get a cameo from the pink sweater?
No pink sweater. I actually auctioned it off for charity, but in tonight's episode, I wore a bow tie, and I'm auctioning off the bow tie tonight. And so people always make fun of when I wear certain things, but there's always a reason behind it. And so last year we raised, I think, like $14,000. Somebody paid $14,000 for the pink sweater.
Wow. Good for you.
Yeah, so that's always a nice one. You can have people make fun of you for doing something, and then you make $14,000 on it for charity, which is nice.
Do you go home to bed at night and lay up and just think, what is the guy going to do with my $14,000 sweater? Like, is it going to hang at the Hard Rock or something? You know what?
I don't even think about that. What I think is somebody thought it was a good idea to make a donation, and they happened to use the sweater as the vehicle to get it. I donated a lunch with me in New York, and somebody paid $55,000 for it. And the guy was just like, look, I just wanted to hang out. And he was a wealthy guy, so he could afford to do it. But he was also a very generous human being to begin with. And so I think that people really have fun making donations. I know I do. I don't know that I would even pay $55 to have lunch with me, let alone $55,000.
I'm going to reserve comment on that one. There's so much fun. Did you order the most expensive thing on the menu or just kind of keep it low key? No,
we actually ate lunch at the cafeteria at CNBC.
Oh, wow.
That's what we did. And he actually liked it because I was on Bayside programming that day. And so I was working. And so he came there and he hung out and we had lunch there. And I think he had like a hamburger or something. But he made it a nice donation and it went to a good cause. So that's always a good thing.
What time are you in the flow? At your most creative / productive or fluid? What time of day?
9:00 at night.
What's the name of your Pandora or Spotify station? What kind of music do you like?
Only country music.
Ooh. And here's the last one. Whose face is absolutely punchable?
Whose face is punchable?
Who's someone that you would punch for free?
Kevin O'Leary. I really don't like him. He knows it too.
Well, you know what you should do for charity is a grudge match.
That puts you in a very uncomfortable situation, which is probably why I do it, just to mess with you too. Because then you're put in the middle.
He came on recently. He's actually doing a lot more platforming, a mediapreneuring. I think he's there's always this hesitancy. Like you said, you didn't like Twitter. I hated Facebook. I still don't like using it. But, now the Sharks are known for being mediapreneurs as much as anything. And so you have to ride that bandwagon if you want to be in that game. I mean, Damon is huge. Kevin's just starting to do it.
So what does that mean? What does that mean to you? When you say they're mediapreneurs, what is that?
A mediapreneur meaning, so I say, do you know what Kevin O'Leary did before he was on Shark Tank? If someone's kind of new to the game and all they know him from is Shark Tank, before that, they had no interaction, no knowledge, nothing.
Right.
So I think what mediapreneurs have realized, and these Sharks are, is that is what they're known for now. That's their industry. So they have to promote that platform and monetize that industry as a whole nother asset.
You mean like with books and other things?
I think just capitalizing on their ability to use their name and their content to grow their own businesses and their own brands.
Interesting.
So I might not be using the right terms, but if Kevin O'Leary they emailed me afterwards and said, hey, we want to distribute this content amongst all of our channels, and no other Shark had done that. And Kevin's not the one who's known for doing it, but I see him much, much more active now on social media platforms. And I think that, if you roll in the circles I do, that there's a conversion rate for followers. If you're selling something or marketing something, the bigger the platform, the more possibility you have to expand your brand and your sales, etc. And if that's what you're known for, then you either have to play the game or you have to.
Well, you know that I'm partners with him in a deal.
Oh, I do.
But let me clarify that. I'm a partner in the deal. He's actually a royalty getter. He's not a partner, and that's in the Wicked Cupcakes. He's actually not an equity holder of that business.
See, that I didn't know.
You know that?
I was told you were a silent partner, and it was a royalty deal. I didn't ask.
There's nothing silent about it. I mean, I'm not a silent partner.
Hmm.
Do you ever know me to be silent?
No, but I didn't ask. I thought that doesn't sound right, but whatever.
No, I'm not a silent partner. He's not a partner. He just gets a royalty on every jar that they sell. Tracy and Scott, who are the husband, wife, and the daughter, who are all part of that business, are the most amazing people. Just the hardest working people that I've ever met. And they get up in the morning and they work, and they go to bed at night and they're still working. They are just... Honestly, they are like the American dream, and she's up for Entrepreneur of the Year from Ernst & Young. It's an award that I won years ago, and she's up for it, and she's way more qualified than I ever was. She's just like on fire. It's just a great family.
Is there anything that gives you more pleasure than to be able to pull people along that same path and help them accomplish as much, or even in some cases more than you have?
Having people that I'm partners with be successful is more rewarding to me than making the money that I make with them. And I know that makes people crazy when I say that, but it just is. There's something fulfilling. And it may be because I don't have kids. It's almost like I look at all these businesses like they are my kids. And I love to see them just grow and get recognized and be rewarded for their hard work. And honestly, I learn a ton from them. I learn a ton from people that I partner with. I learn more about myself. I learn more about business. They teach me things. I teach them things. It's just a really good makeup. Really works.
Well, I know they feel the same way about you because I've talked to both of them. And I think if there's a Shark Tank all-star cast, it's those three, because they've been able to do some amazing things, especially as far as the partnership.
And they're fantastic people to boot. I mean, they're just good human beings.
Mitt Romney and Evander Holyfield just fought for charity recently, and it sounds like it was a lot more exciting than Pacquiao Mayweather. Is there any chance we can get you and Kevin O'Leary to put on the big gold grudge match gloves and see how much money you can raise knocking each other out?
Anytime, any place. But I want it to be like a real fight, though. I don't want it to be just for charity. Like I really want it to be like for real.
Oh, you want to wear UFC gloves?
Event that ends up being a dud.
Oh, if you want to wear UFC gloves, I'm sure you could even. Oh, you're gonna have to give a cutaway, but it'll probably make.
But you know what I will say? All kidding aside, I like to tease Kevin, and I like to tell people that I don't like him. But I know at the end of the day, he has a big heart. He's a wonderful husband. He's got a lovely wife. He is a good guy. His persona is really what I don't like. I don't think you have to be that hard and that cruel with people, but deep down, he's really a good man, and he's trying to capitalize on a situation, and everybody looks at things differently, and I look at business differently than he does. But what I do like is that the viewer and or the young child and or the adult or the business person can choose which path they want. They can get They can get his style, they can get Mark's style, they can get my style. But at the end of the day, if they learn something from everybody, then all of us did our job.
Absolutely. This is my last question, Marcus, just because something that always helps me is when I speak, you talk a lot about hiring people who are smarter than you and being around people who have a bigger vision than you do. I want to know what that looks like for you. Who expands your horizons? Like, what do you see in your own future? You've mastered television, you've mastered business, you've got $1 billion industry. What's next for you?
I have no idea. That's a good question. I really have no idea. I know that, when I grow up, I want to run a university. I know that is a big goal of mine, is to be the president of a university. It doesn't matter how big or how small, but I know that I enjoy the educational side of things. I know that I'd like to potentially have a role in the SBA at some point in the future.
Oh, please do that.
And really bring small business to the forefront in a different way. And using this platform has helped me do that. I know that I won't have a book. I'm not in favor of writing a book. I won't do it. It's because I don't want to be the guy that tells everybody to buy their books. It's not something that I believe.
Maybe a board game? Can you do that?
What's that?
Maybe a board game instead?
No, I don't. I'm not a big fan of. I don't know why, PJ. I haven't really been able to answer it, but I'm not a big fan of commercializing what I do and making money off of it. I just don't. I'm not okay with it. I'd rather, I feel like what I do on the show is I make an investment. I let you see that process, good, bad, or indifferent. I let you learn something from it. I learn something from it, and that's it. And I don't feel the need to kind of monetize or monopolize on sort of that whole environment. It just doesn't, I can't get my head around it. It's one of those my mother would raise her eyebrow things. I don't want to build up a base of people who enjoy the show and then try to capitalize on them. I'm not okay with it. But I'm okay with them going to the businesses that I invest in, giving them a chance, buying, whether it's a handbag or a baseball bat or eating food there. I'm okay with them patronizing those people's businesses. But I don't want that. I don't want to be taking money from people for some good or service that I sell. I just cannot get my head around it.
I did have one other question. Who is your infographic guy? The infographics on The Profit are phenomenal. I love them.
The production company, Machete, that actually makes the show, Amber Mazzola, is the executive producer of the show, and she is the strongest, most stubborn woman that I've ever met, but she keeps me very focused. And her production company makes the show for CNBC, and she does all the infographics. And they do an amazing job. I mean, we obviously talk about what the content is, but they put them up and they add a little bit of fun to them. And she's really the reason that the show is as successful as it is, because she's very good at putting it all together and does a great job.
So it is true, behind every great man,
there's always some strong woman that doesn't get all the credit that they should. But I'm here to tell you that the show's good because of her.
Marcus, thank you so much for your generosity. I know your schedule's crazy, but I know my fans are going to go nuts when they get to hear from you again. So thank you for joining me, and best of luck to you.
All right, my man. Thank you.
Thank you for jumping in to the Shark Tank podcast. Please subscribe to the show on iTunes and head over to sharktankpodcast.net to get the show notes from each episode and join the free Shark Tank Insiders list. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook at Shark Tank Podcast and on Twitter at Shark Tank PDcast.